Welcome to our fourth interview, I can't count, excuse me, on Kung Fu Conversations with the talented Sonny Mannon. Sonny, welcome this morning.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. I suppose. Well, I'm always here. This is my house, but it's nice to be here with you guys virtually.
So. And literally, not just virtually.
Yeah. We're crossing time. We're crossing time and space via Zoom, right?
That's it, my friend. That's it. Sonny, so you and I talked a little bit on Instagram a while back, and we talked about your dad's style of Kung Fu, if you will. So you had an interesting upbringing. We want your full Kung Fu origin story, but would you actually start with what your father did and kind of how he taught you Kung Fu before you learned Kung Fu?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was saying what you're talking about. I was like, well, that was just a PE coach, but I know it now. I kind of am cluing into where you're getting at, and you're exactly right. You know, like when my dad was a phenomenal athlete. Actually, he was like a collegiate level track athlete back in the 50s. You know, like placed nationally, I believe, in the long jump. I mean, he was at USC on scholarship, so just a really phenomenal athlete, multi-sport athlete. And just continued to have a love of athleticism his whole life. You know, he stayed healthy his whole life. He taught, he was a coach of multi-sports up until the college level. I actually played basketball for him 1 year at the community college level, which was really fun. We clashed a lot, but it was still fun. And so he just grew up viewing, the way that we used our physical body to interact with the world was very important. You know, if you learned a sport, you learned how to use your body to do it correctly, not just because that was, the right way to do it, because that was how you were going to have the most fun doing it. That was how you're going to get the most enjoyment doing it, because that's how you'd actually feel the way it was meant to be played, So, I can remember being like 5 years old and being taught how to play ping pong. And it was like, hold it here and, your wrist is here and you got to move this way. It was like, it was like any Kung Fu lesson where, the person would be like, put your hand here and put that there and so on. And so I learned very early on that when it came to like a physical practice, there was most definitely a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it that was not always directly connected to the performance that you were going to exhibit in that art. Because, you could sit there with the best form. I mean, basketball is my main art. And I can have the best form and I can know how to do everything. But I knew that, doesn't mean I was actually going to beat the other guy. I was going to it didn't mean that I was going to, have the advantage every time just because I had a better skill set, And so this was always really intriguing to me. And so it kind of always kept me in the physical realm of training, trying to get better at my sport, getting more athletic. Because, there was always this little bit of disconnect that I saw very early on between knowing how to do something and then your performance of it in a competitive standpoint. You know what I mean? Because I grew up very athletic. I grew up very, working out all the time. I was in the gym from when I was like 10 years old. I was in there like swinging barbells around and stuff, like I can remember. And so I kind of always had this idea that you had to work to be able to do it, but it wasn't a clear path. It wasn't just as easy as, put your arm here and, do this and it's going to happen every time. You got to really work for it. And so when I got into my first Kung Fu class, it was like going all the way back to the very beginning of like, man, I don't know how to do anything correctly. And which I love, I love that, because anytime you find those areas where you're a little bit off, that's where you can find your improvement. That's where you can go into your body method, where you can go into your practice and you can really get a lot out of it, And so, it was kind of set my compass very early on for how I wanted to interact with physical practices. But obviously growing up in the Central Valley of California, there wasn't a Shaolin temple down the street.
Sure.
Which I was very disappointed about. I was very disappointed in as a kid who grew up watching like Black Belt theater and like Shaw Brothers movies and stuff. Like I was like, I'm ready. Where's the Kung Fu school? Like, and where's the Shaolin temple? But, what I had was, was basketball, track and field, and, which ended up being my two main sports all the way through college. And then, just, I love, goofing around, playing things, cause I grew up any sport, I would try to interact with it. It didn't matter what I was doing when I was a kid. If it was tennis, I wanted to learn how to do that correctly and interact with it the right way. If I was playing baseball, I wanted to learn how to interact with the sport the correct way, meaning the movement, the techniques, the strategies, all that kind of stuff. I would try to interact with it so. That was just kind of instilled from very early on.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what was your first Kung Fu class, my friend? And when was that? How many years ago?
Well, excuse me. It was with Sifu Chang, a 7-star Mantis master in Southern California, actually, in Irvine, California. You might be familiar with Sifu Chang and the tragedy that happened to him last year.
It was awful. Yeah.
Yeah, it was awful, and it's not necessarily a direction that, we want to take this conversation, obviously,
sure.
But besides saying that, Sifu Chang was an amazing teacher, his character was evident from the first, time I met him. All that stuff I was just talking about, it was running into Sifu Chang, my first lesson with him, that brought that all back to the forefront, right? So I was probably 22. I just finished playing collegiate basketball. I had a scholarship to a private, like an NAI school, where I played my last 2 years. I played community college before that. I was in high school. I was very high level in basketball, but I started getting a lot of injuries. Actually, I had knee surgery, dislocated my left shoulder twice, cracked some ribs, had an appendix surgery.
Yeah.
I saw all this stuff started adding up where this physical body that I was interacting with, in a sport that I was going like this, my body started, the engine started petering out a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. It started getting stuck going over the mountains, like the plane. And so, and my performance started to go down towards the end of my collegiate career because I just couldn't, my body just couldn't keep up that stress level of performance, with all those injuries keeping up. I mean, I was in an ice bath like every day after practice, up to my neck, which is,
yep.
Ice baths are a great way to ignore what's going on in your body. I'll tell you that. I'll tell you that, because as soon as you get in the ice bath, the body goes, "Ooh, let's reprioritize. Don't die. Don't freeze to death.
Right. Yep.
Don't freeze to death. Your sprained ankle and dislocated shoulder, secondary.
That is important.
Let's not worry about that for a while. Just don't die." So I did that every day for a year. It was great. Or for like 4 years. It was amazing. My body, I didn't miss a practice, but I had to deal with it much, much farther down the road for sure. So anyway, I end up going into Sifu Chang's class, and I still feel like I'm a collegiate athlete, and then of course I just get embarrassed for an hour with everything, because if you ever get a chance to look and see him move, he is as far as his movement, I mean, he just is moving in another plane than most people. I mean, his perception of his movement, his speed, how he moved his body was just second to none, and I grew up around world-class athletes. I mean, my dad was a track coach, and our track team at the college that we were at has sent people to the Olympics, And so I knew what athletes looked like. I knew how athletes moved and what athletes did. I mean, I played with guys that went to the NBA, And so when I saw Sifu Chang and the way he moved, this was not just a natural, athlete, but somebody who had cultivated and embodied their practice to a level that you could see it. You could just see it in everything they did. And for me, coming from like just a deep connection to like a physical culture, meaning, you just use your body. That's how you did it. I saw that and recognized it and wanted it and wanted it really bad, because all of a sudden I'm going down in like, horse stance, and I'm going down in a defensive stance, so my legs are open and I'm bending forward and I got a completely different, and he's just like, "No, straighten your back, do this. And all of a sudden, I'm frozen in place and I can't move and I'm doing it wrong. And I know I'm doing it wrong. And I love it. And it's great because it's like, that's where you get better, right? As soon as somebody can help you see the areas where you're not doing it right, you're like, oh, okay, good. Now I know what I need to work on. And so, it was that. And then him telling me very early on that, these are things that you should be able to get better at and that will make you healthier as you get older. That you'll be stronger when you're 30, when you're 40, when you're 50. And being around athletics and being around older athletes like my dad, who played 3-on-3 basketball up until his 70s,
wow,
like with people less than half his age, and was, he's a whole nother creature. He was more a manimal than human, I think. In person, he's just very, very, and didn't have as many injuries as I did, But so seeing that, and so seeing how some older athletes were able to perform at a very high level at an older age, but then some were not. Like my dad's idol was like Jack LaLanne, And actually, I think my dad wanted to wrestle Jack LaLanne. I think that's what he wanted to do. Because he was uber competitive all the way up until basically until he died. He was just uber competitive until he was like 84. But anyways, seeing that, how some were able to maintain their athleticism, maintain like this kind of vigor, and others were not, and trying to if you have not been exposed to a different perspective like you would get in the Chinese martial arts or maybe from some of the other Eastern practices, from a purely Western perspective, you are working from the assumption that you're having diminishing returns over time.
Right.
And it's just chance. It's just luck. You got lucky that you're healthy this long because you didn't get injured. You got good genetics.
Yeah.
Very few things that you actually were intentionally putting into practice to do. It's just more people just sort of will write it off and then move on because to them, they don't think there is anything actionable, right?
Sure.
Because how do you take action on genetics or chance of being hurt, those kind of things? Because if you were hurt or in an injury, like that's tough to deal with. You are in a different position physically than starting off with than somebody who wasn't, And so because I had those kind of models and examples, but I had injuries adding up, and so things were starting to like not click up. I'm like, I'm strong. I know I'm strong. I know I got athletics. I know how to move my body around, but I'm running into my own, like, the story and the experience that my body had picked up until that point, like the injuries and stuff when you're just a kid or you don't know any better how to move your body. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, I liked that idea. I thought that was a really good idea. And so, and I had already been very deeply kind of into Chinese philosophy. I picked up a copy of the Tao Te Ching when I was like 15 at the local bookstore. And it was because, I was contrary by nature. And so I saw like, it said, oldest book, I was like, or one of the oldest books. I'm like, yes, I'll take this one. If it's older, it's better. Like we all kind of had that mentality at some point, I'm sure, looking into these practices, and so I was one of those people who kind of had two tracks, like I was very physical. I liked the philosophy. And then when I finally saw the opportunity to put them together, it was just like, oh, okay, this is great. This is what I like about it. And then, the physical practice, the martial side, the applications, all that kind of stuff for me is just the fun stuff I get to do along the way of exploring the other aspect, which for me was how can I keep myself physical and strong and maybe undo some of the damage that I had accumulated when I was, a maniac kid playing sports and basketball for like 8 hours a day until I was 22, and then I did the same thing in Kung Fu for a while because it takes a long time to shift your habits and patterns.
Yeah. So, and it takes so much work to get proficient at Kung Fu.
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta lay that experience in the body. You know what I mean? You gotta sometimes, you do that if you we don't have enough movement experience when we usually within our bodies when we go into our practices, because navigating today's world doesn't require a huge variation in movement, and so we don't have the same level of muscle memory or just where we hold the tension in our body is very different than where people even 50 years ago, 100 years ago held tension in their body and how they did it. And the movement and the sort of like, universal muscle memory, maybe you can call it. Like, what's our universal muscle memory today? How to sit,
right?
How to look down, how to do this kind of stuff. And so, that changes depending on the time period and the culture. You know what I mean? People, how many people go and begin their Tai Chi practice knowing how to do a full deep squat? I'll tell you who does. Practically every person who ever did in China. You know what I mean? That's just true because it's necessary. That's just culturally, the toilets are on the ground. You grow up squatting, you eat on the ground. That's a cultural muscle memory of being able to drop down in that thing. That is something that most people did not have to necessarily overcome as something that was never within their grasp, except when they were just like little kids or something. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? You kind of get what I'm saying? Like that's
absolutely, absolutely.
This is why, like in my classes and when I teach and even when I post, I put so much emphasis on body method, because that's what all my teachers talked about. Just the body needs more movement experience. As you're practicing. So, and unfortunately, sometimes. Nobody comes into it being able to, if we came into Kung Fu being able to like move exactly how we're supposed to move, then we wouldn't necessarily need Kung Fu, right? And so you gotta kind of, I assume that you're doing a lot of things wrong that you're going to have to make up for later on. You know what I mean? In your practice. That's my take on it, because that's just my experience when I was playing basketball, or playing sports. As you start, you are going to pick up a crap ton of bad habits. And as you're progressing through the levels, you need to start getting rid of those bad habits. Like when I was playing, I was really good at going to my right. And of course, then force him to his left, okay, well, I started getting really good, go to my left. So it's the same thing in Kung Fu. You know what I mean? Like, yin and yang, you got to be able to go right, you got to be able to go left, So the balance things out.
That's funny. I'll tell you a super quick story, Sonny, because this show's yours. But Owen is actually my fourth Bagua teacher, and he's the only one that has actually stuck with me. And I honestly, because, my origin art, and I still practice it and I still teach it, is Wing Chun. And I think going from Wing Chun, something, very static and very linear, and then, it gets a little dynamic when you're interacting or you're doing Chi Sao with somebody or things like that. But my other three teachers were good teachers, but I don't think I had enough body intelligence to keep it inside of me, to keep the circle walking. And so after a decade of doing some awesome Xingyi, which I still love Xingyi, I was finally ready to try to at least get the Bagua and the circle walking, the turning, because my body was intelligent enough to introduce that kind of movement into it. So
yeah, it is. I can completely understand what you're talking about. It's like I almost had a different experience. Like when and it's almost because I had a little bit of a different experience that I was able to see over time with my Kung Fu brothers and my own students, and sort of in the inverse, or the opposite of that. Like I came into Kung Fu with so much instilled muscle memory within my body from playing athletics that it was just like, it like almost was not necessarily short circuit me, but it allowed me to, it didn't short circuit me. I'll tell you, that's when I think about it now, looking back, short circuits, but in the time, it actually was like, it was like I had a ready-made path to try to interact with these movements. So I actually picked up things quite quickly, but it was one of those things where I would learn like that and then it would just go boom and be plateaued for a long time, because I had learned through the uber competitive environment of Western athletics, which is all performance based, right? Especially, 20 plus 30 years ago, when nowadays it's getting a little bit better, but 20 plus years ago, 30 plus years ago, I would have killed for a massage gun, or, you know what I mean? Or compression devices or things like this. This has been amazing. Or somebody to teach me Qigong in high school, to be able to do some breath work, to know any of this stuff would have been amazing back then. Right. But of course we didn't know any of it. And so, you're just using your body as a tool. And so when I came into it, I knew how to interact with my body. It was a tool for me. And so I could just, you show me something and I would, this is Bagua. All right, let me do it, and I could get to a pretty good approximation of it very quickly because I was a good mimic, because that's what you have to be. You watch people play basketball, you watch people do things. I was a super good mimic. I could copy somebody's movement really quick. I still do. If I love watching other people move, and I'll go and try to copy it and see if my body can figure it out on its own. And so then, but what that did was it allowed me to really heavily lean into my compensations and my strengths. So it took me a long time to really sort of run into that area where I needed to pivot a little bit, and pivot the practice. Like you were saying, how, you first time you did Bagua, it was kind of hard and you went and did some other things, the Xingyi, and came back to it, and then you had a whole different experience to it. It was the same thing with me. It was like I had to kind of follow down one path for a while, letting it sort of sink in, and then got to a point where it finally sort of clicked and I was able to, make some good changes. A big thing of it was, just really getting into the internal arts was the big part, what they call the internal arts. I mean, who cares about when you say internal, external? Once you say it, you got to use it. You can't unsay it. You know what I mean? You can't take language back. If you want to use your F word now, you can go ahead. Sonny. You're more than welcome. No, I'm sure there are more important things to use it on. And I can get quite, I can get quite creative with the expletives too. So,
sounds good.
I can stay away from the F bombs. Throw some other things in. But once I was sort of exposed to those through my other teacher, Andrew Dale, which, if you're not familiar with him, Andrew Dale is still one of the most skilled and just deepest level martial artists I've ever had the pleasure to be around. I mean, and when I studied, after I studied with him before I moved to China, and I visited teachers throughout Beijing for 6 months before I was like, well, nobody's impacting me the way that he impacted me. Cause like I said, I knew movement. I knew what movement was supposed to look like. I knew what relaxed movement looked like, because when you play sports, you got to be relaxed. You got to be able to flow, especially if you're playing a sport like basketball, which is so dynamic. So I knew what that looked like. And I'd been training that for so long. I was still kind of on that path. I wanted to be like, the Michael Jordan of Bagua or something, and so when I saw him, he just was so fluid and so graceful that I studied with him and I downloaded as much as I could. And then when I went to China, I was just going and looking for somebody that struck the same chord with me as he did. And it took me a long time. He had that deep level of skill, but he's just very, humble and unassuming, and just teaching up there in Seattle, and really amazing teacher. His understanding of like body mechanics and body method was what brought me to him, because not only was he showing and demonstrating what he was doing, he was using language that was able to express that movement verbally. Right. So, this is when I got that first real sort of exposure to internal principles, right? Which to me are physics, Taiji physics. When you're talking about it's how we interact, it's early observation of physics without all the tools, the technological tools that we have today that helps us interact with physics, Physics without a microscope or a telescope, you just got your own observations of things. And so that made a lot of sense to me, because when I would put those concepts into play in my own movement, I could feel them. And then when I could feel those concepts in my own movement, I could then compare them to other things, and extrapolate them. That's why I love body method, because it is sort of like, you find the bows of the body are always there, regardless of what art you're doing. And it just depends how you choose to interact with those bows over time, right? And there's going to be your gong fu, right? How you then take that and shape it. Is it going to end up, are you going to interact with it like Tai Chi, are you going to interact with it like Bagua or Xingyi, or how are you going to develop the intelligence throughout that shape of your body and get that body part of the body communicating with the rest of the body over time? And so not only could, I see that he had that and he was using language, that the language and the method with which he was presenting it gave you the tools to follow that path yourself, over time. But it was, obviously it takes a lot of time, and those principles are in and of themselves rather simple, most of them, because when it comes down to it, leverage and pressure dynamics are not overly complicated. They're just very difficult to interact with within the body throughout, complicated movements like, being a person. So
did you? Oh no, go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, please.
No. I was going to ask.
Rambling.
Did you go to Seattle specifically to study with Andrew, or were you already there and you found him?
I had quite, as they say, like itchy feet. I was very nomadic in my 20s, and so I was in Southern California for a while studying with Sifu Chang, and then I decided to move to Japan. and so I moved to Japan, and I lived in Japan for a while, not quite a year, less than a year. While I was there, I actually had my first exposure to, which is a kind of interesting story. I had my first exposure to Tai Chi. Sifu Chang taught Tai Chi, and I went to Tai Chi class on the weekends with him, and he was amazing at it, actually. But I was not really looking at it. I was just kind of curious about it. Then when I moved to Japan, I found a Tai Chi teacher, a French guy who was in Japan to learn the sword and Aikido, working as a wine cellar, of course, whose teacher had instructed him that he must start teaching Tai Chi because he had been practicing for 12 years or more, and it was time for him to start the circle again and go back to the beginning. And he was a bit of a what do you call it? Hesitant teacher. That wasn't really his thing at that time. And I know he wanted to be a teacher, and he was an excellent teacher, but he was just sort of like, he was still very much a student. He was still very much a student. And that's one thing that I've always tried to see in all my teachers. All my teachers, when I go to look for them, I look for things that resonate with me, which is I'm always a student. I'm always getting better. So my teachers, they were people that not only did they have that, but they had it to a degree that I didn't, and so I soaked it up from them. So me training all the time is me just soaking up the influence of my teachers, who also, maybe they're not quite as obsessive as me, because I have a lot of teachers who do a lot of different things, but they are within their practice at all times, and that's what I was looking for, because, I'm in my body all the time. I try to be, as much as possible. And so I met this guy, this French guy, Alexander Malay is his name. And I ended up learning a little bit more about him later. And I was only in Japan for a short time, and he told me, I can't teach you the form. I can't teach you Tai Chi, but I can give you kind of a glimpse of what Tai Chi is, so that when you go on to your next spot, you'll be able to find a teacher who's got the goods. You have an idea of what to look for. And so he made me do standing meditation and walking for like the whole class for the entire time I was there, basically. So usually like 30 minutes or so of standing, and then 30 minutes of walking at least. And then that's all I would do. And when I would walk, he would just sit there and look at my feet and go, wrong, wrong. And so, but I got a really good idea, because what happened during that process of standing meditation, I had several, looking back, I had several changes in state. I released some tension. I got some thing, I had, I let go of tension in the neck that I've been holding probably forever, and so I felt a qualitative difference in my physical body from that. And so that gave me, I was like, okay, this is some real stuff. So that's what prompted me when I then ended up moving to Seattle, because I met a girl, and it was kind of an easy choice because I knew there was a ton of martial arts in Seattle.
Sure.
And so I was in Japan, and then I was in Switzerland for a while living, and then I was in Seattle, and I met the girl somewhere in there, in the middle of there, and found out Seattle had all this martial arts. And so it was an easy choice, and things were going really well with her at the time. And I went over there and I visited almost every teacher in Seattle, and no disrespect to any other teachers in Seattle. But it was when I saved Andy for last. And it's kind of a funny story too. And I hope he listens to this and he doesn't take offense, but because he shouldn't take offense. But it was because when I first saw his website, he had so many things listed on it. He said he Chen Tai Chi, Yang Tai Chi, Xing Yi, Bagua, with all these teachers. I mean, there's like no way somebody could know all of these things. I was under this false assumption at that time. There's all these in my mind over time. These like kung fu fallacies.
Which there are plenty of those. There are plenty.
So many.
Right? Right.
So many. Yeah, so many. And so that you had to be specialized in this one art, only this, that was the only way to get deep skill. And why did I think that? Because when I was a kid playing sports, I was told that you had to specialize in a sport if you're going to be as good.
One sport.
Be the top. And then later on, I ended up finding out that actually most high level college recruiters, if you didn't know this, look for multi-sport athletes because they know those are the athletes that have the most versatility, and they look, because then they can shape that athleticism. If they're too specialized at a younger age in the sport, they've seen it limits growth, right?
Makes sense.
So, excuse me. And so anyway, I saw that, and I'm thinking, there's no way. So I went and I visited all the other teachers. I went and visited a bunch of teachers, and there's some good teachers, really high level martial arts, especially internal martial arts, Tai Chi, Bagua, that kind of stuff in Seattle back in I don't know if it's quite as strong anymore, but I know back from like even the 60s and on, there was really high level stuff going on there in Seattle, and because they had that connection not only in Seattle but up into Vancouver, where you had a really huge diaspora, and especially after World War II and all that kind of stuff went down, And so anyway, saved him for last, went in, observed the class. Within 5 minutes, I was like, yeah, this is the guy. This is totally the guy. This guy does it all and he's got it, like it's all within his movement. And so it was really a big change in thinking for me, because when I saw that here was a more universal movement, not specialized movement, which is where I was trying to go away from, and this is a distinction that I try to make in when I teach in my classes, is that, there are some things that you're doing in your practice that are to sort of universalize your movement. Meaning what I mean by that is like, you're trying to get into the actual levers and leverages that the body is supposed to have and supposed to use, not the specific lever for that you develop through specialized work. With if I was swinging a hammer every day, and I get the Guang Fu of like swinging a hammer every day. Okay, that's specialized, right? But before I even start swinging that hammer, do I have full range of motion in my shoulder?
Sure. Are
my joints communicating to one another in the right order? Am I able to draw in and I like to switch languages, like sometimes, whether using am I drawing into my dantian correctly, or am I creating intra-abdominal pressure correctly? What's my diaphragm doing? What are the muscles in my core? Starting to use different ways to sort of get into how the body's supposed to move, and then use that connection to explore more specialized movement. And I view that as how we're able to keep the body healthy over time, because through the universalizing practice, you're undoing the negative effects that any specialized training will do. The Chinese ping pong team travels probably with the doctor, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? So if you play ping pong enough and get good enough at it, you'll probably hurt yourself, You know what I'm saying? So anything that you do it long enough, there needs to be sort of a self-correcting aspect to the system. Otherwise, you're going to be continually having to undo much of what you just did. Right. So it's versus swinging a hammer every day, going home and getting a massage and using the massage gun and taking ibuprofen or whatever, and then going and swinging the hammer again versus, learning, having a hammer form to learn how to swing the hammer,
right?
And a hammer movement that teaches you how to get the body involved in the hammer, right? So every time you get the hammer, you're doing
right.
You're using how to feel the gravity of the hammer go down. So, you're John Henry, not, Joe Schmo swinging a hammer.
Sure.
Okay. You learn how to make your work what makes you stronger. So not what makes you weaker usually. Right. And to me, that's Kung Fu,
So when you started with Andrew, what did you start with? Where did you begin?
He had a very interesting schedule, the way he did his classes. And I would love to repeat this, but it just doesn't, I don't think it could work anymore. He would teach every night was a 3-hour class of a different style. So, you'd have a night of 3 hours of Bagua, a night of 3 hours, or it was in the mornings actually, 3 hours of Tai Chi, a night of Aikido and all partner drills, which are his Rosho drills, which come from I've never come across a collection of partner work, push hands, soft skills from such a vast, array of sources put together in one place as what he had, because he had so many different teachers that all came from really legitimate backgrounds that had worked to really preserve their arts. And he was like me. He was an athlete too. He was he started in judo when he was young, got into Aikido, was high level Aikido back when it was Tohei and the first generation of guys that were really trying to get after it,
Yeah.
And then he was a very high level, ice skater, figure skater, so he's already spinning in circles. So Bagua was perfect. Right.
And he's got that leg strength that the figure skaters have too.
Oh my gosh. Even I remember before class, he would just go down into a pistol squat with one leg and out to the side and start switching it back like it was nothing, and the dude invented infographics back in the 90s. I've got infographics that he did. I don't even know how he did them, but of all these principles and stuff that are just worth their weight in gold for how this information has been preserved. I don't know how he did it, but now what people are doing in 5 minutes on Canva, he probably had to do with a marker, Scotch tape, and a copy machine. But those things are amazing. But yeah, so he had this sort of setup. 3 hours of this, 3 hours of this, always Qigong before, the Tai Chi, so I did Chin Tai Chi with him. I did Bagua. I did partner, all the partner work, and I did Aikido too, because why not, and then I would have done his Yang Tai Chi, which is, I did study, quite a bit of it through his Yang Tai Chi is very interesting. All of all the arts that he teaches are very interesting. The teacher was quite acclaimed, had a very deep level of skill, and he taught the solo Sanshou form, where you had one person doing the form. There's 2 sections that you do as a solo form. It's very natural movement. Then you point them at one another, and it becomes a partner form.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so cool.
So that was something that he taught everybody in the school. So it was it didn't matter if you're doing Chin Tai Chi, Bagua, or Yang Tai Chi or Aikido, you can communicate through that partner form, and work different energies through the partner form. And so it's not a very common set, the Yang Tai Chi, partner form like that. It's a really fun set to practice. And so, I studied as much as I could with him. I was also at the same time studying, Tai Chi Mantis with another guy in town. And so I kind of started that before I met Andy, because I came into Seattle with that already a mantis background. So what's the first thing you do?
Sure.
Go find another mantis, right?
Sure.
Because we're all just creatures of habit, you know, at the end of the day, right? And so, but I knew I wanted the internal stuff because like the guy that I had met in Japan. And so I was doing Tai Chi Mantis a couple times a week with a very, very skilled teacher, really interesting guy. And that was a lot of fun. And I continued to do that for a little while. Otherwise I would have been at every single class that Andy taught every day. I mean, I was luckily with the job that I was doing at the time, I could kind of set my own schedule to like work as, I enjoy living very simply, so I can have the time to do the things that I like to do, you know? And so this is not a new thing. I've tried to refine my innate laziness and turn it into some form of Zen, you know? But it doesn't always work. And so I was lucky that I just trained as much as I could, you know, like I was able to train and go to as many classes as I could with him. And then after that, when I moved, one of the main reasons I moved to China was because of his influence, because of so many teachers that he had and all those different influences. I was like, well, let me go find some influences. Let me go find some different things that I could throw into the mix. Because the time that I spent with him was so, I was practicing, the amount that, you know, like, I practice now, which I mean, maybe comes through a little bit on social media, which, you know, I am practicing all the time, is nothing new. I've been doing this since I was like, you know, 6 years old and going and kicking the soccer ball against the backstop, you know, for hours, you know, so the time that I spent with him was very, very, productive. And especially with understanding the principles, getting into the softer side of the arts, which was immensely important for me coming from a Western sports background. I had a lot of tension and a lot of tightness that I needed to work out, you know, and I'm still working it out. And so that was really, really good. And so then I took all that and I took that to China, looking to see what I could find, you know what I mean? Looking to see who I could run into over there that was going to, because Andy, I remember, said something one time. I hear his voice in my head all the time, which is fine. Sometimes it's better than mine. And you know, he said that when he would see a teacher, and if they moved a certain way, and he resonated with that, you know, his body resonated with that, and he wanted to move that way, he would go and want to learn from them, you know, and try to get that. But if he saw a teacher and the way they moved or something that didn't inspire him, he didn't feel it, you know, like in his body, then he wouldn't. So that was kind of what allowed him. He was just trusting he was trusting his instinct. He was trusting his gut. He was trusting his body with his physical practice, which I think is a pretty good idea sometimes, you know? And so when I went to China, that's what I was doing there too. I was going around and I was looking for people who I would meet that would kind of make me go, you know, like my body would react. Either I want what they have. I want to be able to do what they have. And I had a pretty good idea what I was looking for physically. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, I never had any, even though, you know, I'm in these internal arts, right? Because of my background in Western sports, I've never been under the false assumption of the way stress and physics works in the body. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, and so because of that, my exploration of these arts is very much in terms of just trying to optimize how you move. You know what I mean? And that's what I let guide me. So when I find teachers and I see that they're moving with that relaxed strength, they're relaxed, but they're strong. And then I look for their personality, to be honest. Yeah. Like, you know how many teachers I've met that just don't smile? You know, if a dude can't smile, I do not want to train. You know why? Yeah. Because something in that guy is locked up and stuck, and you're going to build a deep relationship with your teacher, and you're going to download that stuff.
Yep.
And and so you know the person that you want, your I saw a nervous system around. This is getting popular these days, talking about the effects of nervous system around. You know, you want to be around some nervous systems that are regulated and are using their practice to help regulate it, and how they're doing it is how you want to do it. You know, so I tried to make. Like if a teacher would start pointing out flaws, you're this, you're this, you're this, you're this, without, that's something I know. I know that's super traditional and it's all that kind of stuff. You want a critical teacher. But the thing is like, when a teacher is doing that and I'm like, the ear don't even move well, you don't have good stances. You're not relaxed. Why would you tell me that? Why? Your body can't tell me anything right now. You know what I mean? Your body, you're telling me this with your words, but I am not seeing you in your body exhibiting this. So why would I listen to you? My body goes, no, when people tell me that, because they don't have it. But when somebody who has it starts to tell you, oh yeah, relax, put this down. Well, you go, oh, okay, yeah, I gotta relax. You know why? Because they're relaxed. They know what it feels like, right? There's a difference when somebody who is telling you a principle is telling you it, who knows what it feels like versus just thinks they know what it feels like. And you know what the difference is? Just watch the practice. Watch how they move. That doesn't lie. It does not lie. How we move. It's just, when these practices are meant to bring our mistakes out into the open within our movement. You know what I'm saying? It's the whole thing. Stay in your courtyard for 10 years. Why? Because you suck for 10 years. So when so you have to, but that's like a little bit of like, it's really easy to dismiss that statement, but it's more like you need to look for your suck. You need to always be finding your suck. Where do you suck? Invest in loss. Always finding the places where you're not quite there, because you need to assume that you're doing a fair amount of it wrong at all times. Yep. You know what I mean? Yep. That's a better intention to set than just assuming you're doing it right at all times, right? 100%. Of those, one will lead to growth, one will not.
That's it. You're stagnant. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So did you know Chinese before you went to China?
No.
Okay.
No, I did not. But the first Chinese I did learn was 这个动作怎么用, which means how do you use this move? Nice. I went to the where I was working at the time. It was like, how do you say, how would you say like, teach me how to use this technique. And I would sit there and practice at work. 这个动作怎么用? Then I would go to the first time I said to my teacher, I just said to him, just laughed his ass off, and she went, blah, 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 blah. I was like, can you just kind of hit me or something, please? Because I didn't get any of that, and so I joked that I was very good at Kung Fu Chinese before I could speak about anything else. And so, but it was a lot of fun. I love Chinese. I still I talk to myself in Chinese, which makes it feel a little less weird sometimes. So it's like you're practicing something. Mm-hmm. If I'm speaking to myself in Chinese, I can just tell myself, well, I'm keeping my language skills sharp. I'm not talking to myself when nobody's around. But and so I learned through my teachers, my martial arts teachers over there, just going to class, and they didn't speak English. And so that was another thing. If I met a Kung Fu teacher over there who spoke English, I was just like, no, I know how much you need to train to get good, and there's no way you did both.
That's an interesting point. I like that.
You know what I mean? Like, no way you did both. Same thing. Like, they had too good of a job. I was like, nope. College education? No. My teachers over there, one, no college education. He was amazing. He was hyper intelligent and in martial arts, a brilliant mind, and he's perfectly fine. He's a successful guy, but didn't go to college. And because he trained martial arts his whole youth through his 20s, that was his life. That's what I wanted to train with. My other teacher, that was my shuai jiao teacher who I was just speaking about. And then my Bagua teacher over there, same thing. From a child, he went to the sports universities back when they had real teachers, legit teachers. And he had been training from a young age with legit teachers, and then went to the sports school, and then went to the sports university. And then, because he was a very, very unique individual, ended up, making some people a little bit upset over time. And so that's why he was out at the Beijing Language and Culture University teaching us weird foreigners who would show up going, 这个动作怎么用? How do you use this move? And so those are the guys that I look for, And so I just kind of would, I didn't know how long I was going to be in China, but once I met both those teachers on the same day, actually.
Wow.
And because they were friends, and which was like winning the lottery, you know? And so when I met him, he was, the word that comes to mind is gregarious. You know, he was big, and he's like my size, which I'm a fairly large person. I'm almost 6'3", you know, and he was like over 6 foot, probably like, you know, 200 pounds, like a big dude, you know? And so I was like, this, I can relate to that because I'm a larger person. So I want somebody who has my same physics, who's dealing with the physics closer to my body, you know? Sure. And the thing is, it's kind of weird too. In basketball, I'm short. In basketball, I'm a small person.
Sure.
So it was like all of a sudden when I got into Kung Fu, it was like I was back in like 5th grade again, and I was taller than all the kids. I'm like, what? Why do I feel so awkward? You know? It was like a second growth spurt that didn't happen to me. You know? So anyway, you know, like training with him, he was just so physical, and you could see his practice. He embodied it. He practiced with us. He set an example, and that was something that Andy did too. Andy practiced with us too, you know? And I realized that all my teachers practiced with us. They were setting the example of not only here, let me just be the teacher and show you, you know, like, tell you what to do. I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to show you how I do it so that you have an idea on how it can be done, you know? So, and not necessarily saying this is the way it has to be done, but they were all like, you know, you got to find your own Kung Fu, obviously, because you're dealing with your body. And because they knew their bodies very well, they knew enough. And because they knew their bodies very well, and all of them had had a lot of experience physically, you know, not necessarily, none of them were super roughnecks, you know what I mean? Where they were going to go and fight, but a lot of partner practice, a lot of real world experience, a lot of people, a lot of teachers who had real world experience, you know, coming out of, you know, World War II era kind of stuff, you know? And so they understood that everybody's different. Everybody comes into a different place. You know, you push on some person, they've got a lot of locks. They got some person's white. You know, they understood that people come into it with a lot of different bodies. Excuse me. And so you have to lead, the practice is going to be very unique for each individual. So if you do not have a robust physical experience of like, you know, interacting with other bodies, you know, like, okay, you play football or something, you know, there's a lot of different people feel a lot of different ways. Play basketball, same thing. People feel and move a lot of different ways. So you kind of know that you have to assume right from the beginning, there's going to be no one exact way to do it. So to counterbalance that, you get back to that sort of those universal principles, finding standardization of movement. And that's how you try to use those principles to move forward. And so because I was coming into it with a lot of limitations that were set in because of my movement experience, you know, I was always a little too old to start Kung Fu. I was always a little too old to start Shuai Jiao. I was always a little too old to go into tournaments. You know what I mean? And, which I didn't really give a shit about. I can drop as many of those as I want. Is that fun? I'm just saying. You know, I just liked the atmosphere. I loved the training. I loved the something to energize the practice. You know what I mean? And so even the fact that I was a little bit older was something that gave me a little bit of energy in the practice. Being like, well, I don't care that I'm going to still try to figure this out. You know, I'm going to still try to figure out how to get the most, optimize my system, train the right way. And, you know, and I had teachers who were incredibly technical. And so they could, when I had questions, I had so many questions, you know, I always joke with my students that they never ask questions. And maybe it's because I, you know, talk too much. I don't know, but I'm like, you guys need to ask more questions. But, they always had answers, you know? And if they didn't have answers, they would go reference the source material, which means they would start moving, you know, and look for it. And then they would be like, oh, well, yeah, you know, there's there. And then Andy told me once, he's like, listen to what I say, but my body is usually always ahead. So always listen and look and then find where it's in between, you know? So because the words are there to just sort of like get you close, and then you got to find it, And so, but and so that kind of just, that still leads me. That's why I love social media is great. People post all kinds of stuff. I'm just like, oh, what's that? I'm gonna go try it. People posting all their kung fu on the social media is great. Thanks, guys.
How old were you, Sonny, when you started working with your Bagua and your Shuai Jiao teachers? Not that age matters. We know you were too old, right?
Right.
You were too old.
Right. Too old, meaning that's when you, I'd say, the best time to start kung fu was, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Second best time is right now. So if you're gonna, you're always working in the second best time, so you might as well start now. So you're always a little bit too old. You got to catch up. I started with Sifu Chang when I was about 22. I started Bagua with Andy maybe around 25, 26 or something. And then I moved to China when I was about 30, I'd say. So I started 29, 30 and I'm 44 right now. And so, when I started Shuai Jiao, I was about 30 when I started Shuai, 29, 30. But then, I just trained really hard. We had, our practice spot was at the Beijing Language and Culture University. And we started off there training. We'd be outside in front of the gymnasium. We'd be in the foyer of the gym. My teacher, John Lauscher, who's my Bagua and many other things. Actually, he was quite the polymath when it came to martial arts. He would store stuff down in the basement and would carry our mats up every day, and you'd wrestle on these little 1-inch thick mats in the atrium, and then eventually we ended up moving up to the balcony. They had this huge balcony about the size of a basketball court that had a roof and it was exposed on 3 sides and looked down into the soccer field that they would play on, next to the stadium. So we were on the 3rd floor, but we were exposed to the elements. And so we trained outside in Beijing year round. So freezing temperatures in the winter, still putting the jackets on, going on the mat, getting after it. Usually there'd only be a couple of us at that point. And then also through the summer when it's 40 plus degrees. And so we had that spot up there. It was really good. It was nice because we could focus in and get a lot of good training up there. And it was a lot of fun. And so I started that, about 30, and then moved back here to the States, and opened the school here when I think it was 39 when we came back. So we've just been back in the States for a few years. So just right before the pandemic, which is both fun and not fun because at least we weren't in China when it was. We've been locked down much, much worse. We missed that by a few years, but it did kind of put a little bit of a cramp in opening the school and promoting, getting things going with teaching. But yeah. But now I don't feel too old anymore. I feel quite young because now, it's like, when you become a teacher, it's like, there's that, they expect you to be old. The only reason I have this beard is because people don't take me seriously, but I'm not.
Owen grows his for the winter, so he's wise in the winter.
Yeah. I grow it for the perceived wisdom, not the actual wisdom.
Still working on that one.
Yeah.
So COVID hit, but it seems like you have a pretty successable online school, Sonny. Go ahead. Yeah,
because the word successful, that's the one I might argue. Successful in terms of the skill that the students that are building within the online program. Yeah, very much so. I'm very happy with how the students that I have in my online program are progressing. Successful that I'm happy with how it's going. I'm very happy. It's a small program, so I guess that's what I mean. It's not very big. Surprisingly enough for, as niche as what I teach as far as Beijing Shuai Jiao is concerned, there's actually, I don't get a whole lot of interest, to be honest, of people wanting to join the programs. And so, yeah, anybody who's listening, you want to join the program, come on in. I'm just kidding. Not really though.
Yeah, no, that's part of what we do here. You know,
No, that's honestly, yeah.
To talk to you and help you promote things. And...
A large reason for that is me, because I do nothing to promote it really. The only people that very few people know about it, honestly. Like I rarely promoted. I rarely put it out there. Like I'll be like, oh man, I got to do something. I need to put something out there about the online program, because really I love sharing shuaijiao. I love sharing it. And that's why I pivoted to the online program, is because I want this out there. I want people practicing it more. Right now it's a thing that people don't know anything about. Like they used to not even know what shuaijiao is, right? And then they didn't know enough to know that there were different styles. Now they kind of know that there's different styles, and maybe some people have a little bit of an idea what the difference is between one style and another style, but they probably don't. You know what I mean? Because how many people have actually trained Beijing style shuaijiao to a significant degree?
Sure.
Very, 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 very few. Very few, And so how many people have actually trained with me to a significant degree in the States? Not very many. So most people's assumption of Beijing shuaijiao is based off of either what they have gotten through another lineage of shuaijiao, because other styles of shuaijiao are always bringing in this. We're always stealing from people. Of course that's how it goes. It's martial arts. It's the most sincerest form of flattery, right? To steal things. But once again, it comes down to how you train. It comes down to your teacher and how you train, how deeply you understand the method. You can go buy a book on shuaijiao. There's a lot of information in there. It's not going to help your hip throw. You know what I mean? So I want to sort of up the knowledge of what Beijing shuaijiao is, because it has made such an impact on my own practice going into that from a body method standpoint, because it took a lot of vague concepts and made them very binary, because the goal was simple. Throw the person down, right? Okay.
Yep.
So the goal is simple. The person is supposed to go down. And people think shuaijiao is rough and ready. Shuaijiao is it's like an internal martial art. Beijing shuaijiao, from the teachers that I've studied from, it's like an internal martial art without the qigong. Like everything was body mechanics, everything was principles, everything was technique, everything was strategy, right? External form only represented those, right? There's no fixed shapes, right? There's nothing like that. It's just, it is building the skill that's needed. And so because it's a binary, you're looking for a binary result, that opens up a huge area for exploration, because within that binary result is a huge gray area. You know what I mean? For how you can do the technique, because you can look at a technique and you can approximate a technique. I can teach people to do a hip throw very quickly. Everybody can do a hip throw, pretty much. Sure. I see shuaijiao, out of shape Taiji people doing hip throws, right? Okay, let me see you use it. Right? They will never use it. Most of them never, period. Right? So they're playing pretend for a lot of that practice. Why? Because they don't know the proper dynamics. They don't know the proper body method. They don't know the proper angles, the proper spacing. They don't know how that technique connects to the principles. They don't know the strategy. They don't know where the person's supposed to be. They haven't trained the methods correctly. Maybe they have some of it. I don't know if they have all of it. But in Beijing shuaijiao, we look incredibly deeply. It's like taking a microscope into one aspect of your art and then seeing how you can take all of those connections and bring them out into the rest of your practice, right? Because if you're overly focused in the striking aspect, right? That's external, right? You're hitting something that's not connected to you until the very last moment, right? So you definitely have to project out. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're doing Tai Chi, Bagua, whatever. You want to hit something's got to go out, right? When you put two hands on somebody and you're going to throw them, where is your energy going? It's going in. It's going into them, which means you have to draw it into you so you can throw them. Okay. So the dynamics oftentimes are we come into a throwing situation trying to use striking dynamics when you should be going into a striking situation using throwing dynamics. And so by using shuaijiao training, that's how it unlocks body method on a very, very deep level when trained correctly, because now everything that you do, because if my arms are moving through space with a strike, that's an open chain activity, right? I mean, it's not closed, right? It's like swinging something in a rope. If I'm holding something and drawing it through, that's a closed chain activity. That means you're going to have to mobilize the body differently. It's going to give you a much better sense of center, right? I was thinking of the sort of zhongxin, right? Self-centered. It gives you a much better sense of your waist, a much better sense of your back, how you're actually supposed to move from your back. So it was when I started getting into Beijing Shuai Jiao that all these principles that have been instilled in me from Andy, from Bagua, started to come alive in a very real sense. Because, I was a Bagua practitioner, a Chang style Bagua practitioner before I did Shuai Jiao. And my main Bagua teacher, had also been did Shuai Jiao at the sports university and was also a student of Li Baoru, and also was spending a lot of time practicing Shuai Jiao with us. And alongside my Shuai Jiao teacher, who was only did Shuai Jiao from like the age of 8 and was like a high level student of Li Baoru. And so, it was fascinating to train these things at the same time in the same place where, I feel like that's something that's supposed to happen in Bagua, right? That sounds familiar. Shuai Jiao and Bagua being together, like as many people as say it's together. I'm not sure if they really understand it. Why? Because how many people have actually trained it? So many Bagua people just come in and are just like, yeah, we got Shuai Jiao. I'm like, all right, let's wrestle. Let's see. If you got it, let's see. Let's wrestle a little bit. I'd love to set up like a Bagua Shuai Jiao, Bagua Tai Chi, Shuai Jiao, conclave, have some exchange. We tried to do that in Beijing a couple of times, and it was very interesting results. As one of the few foreigners that were involved in that community, it was quite interesting. It was good. It was quite interesting. I'd love to have some of that stuff going, because I think there is a little bit, when people think Shuai Jiao these days, they think mostly competition. They think mostly the tournaments. And actually, I didn't even know there were Shuai Jiao competitions until I've been training Shuai Jiao, until I actually started training Shuai Jiao for a while. I got into it because when I first saw my Shuai Jiao teacher, it was when I met my Bagua teacher. I was talking to my Bagua teacher, and I glance over, and there's a mat, and there's guys doing Shuai Jiao. And my Shuai Jiao teacher, Liu Ziguang, is about 6'3" and 125 kilos.
Whoa, that's a big boy.
Built like a NFL linebacker with the same level of athleticism.
Wow.
He's a freak of, I don't want to say he's a freak of nature, because he is a trained individual. He has trained Shuai Jiao obsessively from a young age. Body method, technique. I mean, he's just obsessive about it. Even though he's like 250 around. I mean, when he competed, he was about 230, really lean for him. But he was in the heavyweight. He was oftentimes the smallest guy. He would have to go against guys like 280, 300 pounds, like that kind of stuff. And all of his teachers were little guys. So he actually wrestles like a small person, even though he's that big. His techniques are high-low techniques, start high, drop low, send him over, And so when a dude that big does it on you, yeah, you go. So wrestling against him for 8 years was an incredibly humbling experience. So I'm watching him dismantle this Czech guy who was about 6'6" and easily like 280. He's throwing him over his shoulder. This guy's getting yanked around like he's a sack of potatoes. I'm just seeing like the physics, the amount of like force that's being put around this mat that this guy is just throwing around. I was just like, what is that? My teacher, through this guy that was making the introduction and translating, just a friend of mine, one of those guys you just run into in China, a British guy who had been living in Wudong, for a while and kind of, he's like, oh, that's my friend. He does shuaijiao. He's here all the time. You want to learn shuaijiao? You just learn from him when he's here. He'll teach you. It's like, okay. And there it was, So we go to the same place, training Bagua and all this stuff, like a few days a week, and shuaijiao a couple of days a week. And the first time I wrestled with my teacher, I mean, it was just, softest person I've ever wrestled against, and soft as Andy when it came to like the softness in Tai Chi, but the explosiveness he had in his power was ridiculous. I mean, he will, and this is I'm not going to say who this was because this person is a very high level martial artist, a really good friend of mine, and he will back this up. It's the funniest thing in the world. He was wrestling with him. He came to visit, and my teacher grabbed him with one hand by the jacket and went and just shook him, and he face planted on the ground.
Wow.
And because he had such explosive power in his arms, which we train a lot of in shuaijiao. I mean, people talk about Fa Li and Fa Jin. I have no idea what they're talking about because it just looks like, because we train it. You know what I mean? Like we train it in shuaijiao with a purpose, like it's real. And so like, it's no big deal. It's just all you're doing is off balancing people and moving a certain way, and people make such a big deal. But anyway, his ability to like do that on the right vector at the right time with the right connection to the person, that is Fa Jin. That's Jin, right? It has to have a closed chain and an external intent and manifestation, right? And that is not just going, doing a chin style form and trying to blow the dust off your jacket. You know what I'm saying? It's understanding the how that goes into a person with a specific effect, right? And so, like they're off balance this way, I'm going to pop like this way. And I don't know if this is actually going to be only on, when I say this way, I'm going at a slight vector down and forward, right? I'm going to chop the gate. I'm going to do all these different things that don't just have a representation in your movement, but have an analogous effect in the partner. So you know what you're looking for. When I do a Fa Jin, I know what I'm looking for because that is an opening for me to come in and do something. So it needs to be much more specialized than just, it's got to be pop. And then where am I to get into the next movement? Right. That's it. And then there's another one and another one and another one, because it's really just you being able to throw the person, get him down by using your force in different ways. And so, man, he did that one hand, he just like the perfect timing. The guy was leaning a little too forward, had a little too much sway, whack, face plant. This guy weighed 200 pounds too, so it wasn't like he was a little guy. And so that's Dog War. that's him. And so training with him every day. Yeah. Like if I ever got a throw, which did not happen that much against him, to be honest, man, that was the day you went home and wrote your diary for sure.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Like Dear Diary. I got one. He was sick and wasn't looking, but I still got him.
You have that part can be in parentheses. So when it's in the book, that's edited out for the book. That's in the notes at the bottom. Yeah, that's in the appendix at the bottom. Yeah.
So
go ahead, Owen.
No. I was just going to ask. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So here's this. This is not asking. So to go off of what you said, we will help do some of the advertising for you. So awesome. First off, thanks for being on the show. One, even though we're not finishing up, thanks for being on the show. Two, we're going to put your school and everything in the show notes. And then we send this out to quite a few different people. I actually know one of your students too. Matthew Kruger. Are you familiar with that gentleman?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure. Matt's a really cool guy.
He's a cool cat.
Yeah. He's very, introspective in his practice, and I really like him. I'm glad he's part of the program. He did my online program which is like these subscription videos that I did. This was actually pre-pandemic that I did this. I created a bunch of tutorials that people can sign up for, and it's quite good. I'm really happy with it. It was like several years ago that I did it, and I'm always sort of upgrading my knowledge and so those are very good tutorials that people go on and like can get a lot of information. But he's actually now starting I've been doing an instructor training program the last couple of years, kind of behind like as a small group, and working to sort of like with other people that are already martial artists, to try to teach them our methods, our Guang Wu Shuai Jiao kind of curriculum, how we do things, work with them. And so this year I'm actually going to be opening it up as just sort of like an ongoing advanced sort of Shuai Jiao training class. Like, it's going to be like a once a month thing, 4-month modules, folk with a kind of specific curriculum, so that people can just like once a month join in and get have an ongoing training in, Beijing Shuai Jiao, so that we can just start to like up the awareness of the practicality of the art. Because I find it to be an incredibly practical art, an incredibly useful art. It doesn't have like the same bias that many arts come into it with, like it's an incredibly neutral art, meaning that I've worked with people from almost any style you could name. I've had them come and train with me and find overlap because because Beijing Shuai Jiao is so heavy on principles and body method, people will start doing techniques and they're fluid techniques. Everything's fluid and explosive. And you're looking to find these concepts of how you move, waist like a coiled snake, feet like drills, and all these principles that guide our movement. And then they'll be like, oh, well, this is like this move in this form, or this is like this exercise that we do. And it's like, yeah, of course it is, because, it's, but maybe that's like this, not this is like that, because this is a binary thing. We're doing it very specifically. You can't, when you find a movement in the form, there's oftentimes, room for interpretation in the movement in the form, right? There's room for interpretation. The pt1, you'll have people, it's a strike, it's a throw, it's a lock, it's all, right? It's all of those. Great. Well, that's a whole lot of work, man. If you want it to be all of those, you need to train it to be all of those. You can't just say it's all of those.
Sure.
And all of those are different body methods. Striking is one. Joint lock is another. A throw is another. All of them require different body method, different timing, different focus. You can get into a strike really quick. If you're there, boom, you can hit a strike. If you have the chance, you got your arm out, you can hit him with the strike. You don't need to you need to be a whip-like right into that. If you got a joint lock, well, you're going to have to mobilize a little bit more of the body to get the joint lock into place, right? If you're going to do a throw, all of it at all times. You know what I'm saying? So there's different levels of the body method that need to be there in the technique that need to be able to be brought into, a partner situation and solo practice and differentiated it. So that's a super, super complicated practice. Shuai Jiao, if you should learn a move, it's one move for one thing. And that's what, and when you learn it that way, you find out how that one move for one thing is also in all these other places, right? But you learned it the first way, how to use it in a very clear way, because you're using it to throw somebody down, and the whole body has to be connected to it. And so then disconnecting a part to find how that relates to a strike, or disconnecting a little bit or loosening up how it relates to a shoulder, to a joint lock or something. Well, that's on you. That's why it is such a useful art for the martial artist, because you take that binary practice of how do I do this throw? How do these do these body methods? And then you work, downstream to the other expressions and where you might find overlap within your more specialized practice, right? Because when you create something very binary, like a throw, you're using all the levers in the body. There's only going to be so many ways to do it, only going to be so many ways to do it right. And I remember one shuaijiao person here in the States, was like, we were talking and he was like, yeah, shuaijiao, a hip throw is a hip throw, and I was like, I don't know if I can work with you. You're not speaking my language. If you're saying a hip throw is a hip throw is a hip throw. You know what I mean? If that's the case, why don't anybody hit hip throws? And why doesn't everyone who practices hip throws are able to use hip throws or even use them against a weaker opponent? Usually the only time that a lot of times, like as the intensity increases and the level gets closer together, you see technique go out the window a lot of times in people who haven't necessarily trained the right way, right? They only can use their stuff when there's a huge gap